Before the world went quiet, my life was defined by noise. Construction sites, diesel engines, shouting foremen, and the constant, grinding hum of the city traffic that never really slept. I was a project manager for high-end residential builds, the guy you called when the architect drew something impossible and the client wanted it done by yesterday. I spent 20 years fixing other people's mistakes and ulcers, watching my blood pressure climb and my marriage to Sarah turn into a roommate situation where we passed each other in the hallway like ships in a foggy harbor. Sarah was, and is, a respiratory therapist. She spent her days managing ventilators and watching people fight for air in fluorescent-lit rooms that smelled like antiseptic and despair. By the time we hit 40, we were both burned-out cinders. We had money, sure. We had the nice house in the suburbs and the 2 cars. But we were tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. That's why we took the job at Silver Pine. It sounded like a joke at first. A recruiter found my profile, saw my background in off-grid systems and logistics, and made an offer that didn't make sense. They needed a caretaker couple for a private, resilient community deep in the North Cascades. 6 months on, 6 months off. The pay was absurd. The catch was the isolation. Silver Pine isn't a town. It's a fortress dressed up as a ski resort. 6 massive timber frame lodges owned by tech moguls and hedge fund managers, sitting in a bowl of granite and pine at 5,000 feet. There's no road in, only a helipad and a rugged service track for heavy machinery that gets snowed in by November. The owners call it a vacation retreat. But when you look at the specs, the triple-pane ballistic glass, the underground systems, the redundant solar arrays, you realize it's a lifeboat. A lifeboat for people who can afford to buy their way out of the apocalypse. Our job was simple. Keep the lights on, keep the pipes from freezing, and keep the driveways clear of snow for owners who rarely showed up. We lived in the caretaker's cabin, a sturdy but small A-frame right at the main gate, guarding the single service road that snaked up from the valley floor. For the first 3 months, it was paradise. The silence up here has weight. It presses on you. The air smells like cedar and ice, so clean it almost hurts your lungs. Sarah's cough went away. My hands stopped shaking. We rediscovered what it meant to cook dinner together without checking our emails. We were stewards of a kingdom that sat empty, polishing the silver on a sinking ship, though we didn't know it was sinking yet. The shift happened on a Tuesday in late November. It didn't start with explosions or sirens. That's the movie version. The reality of the end is much more boring and much more confusing. It was 8 o'clock hours. I was in the caretaker's cabin, drinking coffee that was too hot, staring out the front window at the snow accumulating on the service road. The sky was a flat, bruised purple, heavy with a storm front moving in from the Pacific. Sarah was in the kitchen, organizing the inventory list for the medical bay in the main lodge. "Internet's dragging," she said. Her voice was casual. "Just a minor annoyance." I took a sip of coffee and glanced at the router lights on the shelf. Probably the storm. The satellite dish gets finicky when the clouds stack up. "No," she said, tapping her tablet screen. "It's not buffering. It's gone. No signal." I stood up, stretching my back, habitual stiffness from years of construction, and walked over. The router was blinking that angry, rhythmic red pulse. I reset it. We waited the standard 2 minutes. Nothing. "I'll check the dish," I said. Wind might have knocked the alignment. I pulled on my heavy canvas coat, the Carhartt one with the grease stains on the cuff, and stepped out onto the porch. The cold hit me instantly, wet and aggressive, about 28 degrees Fahrenheit. The snow was falling in big, heavy flakes, the kind that muffle sound and stick to your eyelashes. I walked around the side of the cabin to the comms array. Silver Pine doesn't use standard HughesNet junk. We have a military-grade uplink meant to punch through anything short of a nuclear winter. The dish was heated to prevent ice buildup. It was moving, swiveling on its axis, searching for a handshake from the sky. It wasn't an alignment issue. The hardware was working perfectly. It just couldn't find anyone to talk to. I felt a small prick of unease, right at the base of my neck. I went back inside, stomping the snow off my boots on the mudroom mat. "Dish is fine," I said, unzipping my coat. "Must be a provider outage. Space junk, maybe." Sarah looked up. She had that look she used to get when a patient's monitor threw a weird number. Focused, analytical. "The landline is dead too, Elias. We had a hard line buried deep, running miles down the mountain to the nearest junction box. It was the fail-safe." I picked up the receiver on the wall. No dial tone. Just a dead, hollow silence. Not even the static hum of an open line. "Okay," I said. "So a tree came down on the main trunk line down in the valley. Happens every winter." "And the satellite?" she asked. "Coincidence," I lied. Or I hoped it was a lie. "Let's give it an hour." The hour passed. The snow fell harder. The wind picked up, whistling through the gaps in the eaves. At 10 a.m., the power flickered. Silver Pine runs on a local microgrid. We have a massive solar farm on the South Ridge, a small hydroelectric turbine in the creek, and a bank of Tesla Powerwalls in every lodge. We are technically grid-tied, but we usually sell power back to the county. When the lights dipped and surged, it meant the connection to the main grid down the mountain had been severed. The system was isolating itself. I heard the heavy thunk-clack of the transfer switch in the utility closet. The hum of the refrigerator changed pitch. "We just island," I said. "Main grid is down." Sarah closed her tablet cover. She didn't slam it, but the sound seemed loud in the quiet room. "Phone, internet, and power. That's not a tree falling, Elias." I walked to the gun safe. Not because I thought we were under attack, but because habit is a powerful thing. When the job site goes unsafe, you put on your hard hat. When the world goes weird, you check your tools. I spun the dial, left, right, left, and the heavy steel door swung open. "What are you doing?" Sarah asked. She wasn't scared yet, just wary. "Just checking inventory," I said. "We need to go up to the main lodge. I need to see the system diagnostics on the big board. The caretaker cabin only shows me local stats." "I'm coming with you," she said. We geared up. This is something people forget. In a survival situation, your clothes are your first shelter. We put on thermal base layers, wool socks, waterproof pants, and heavy parkas. I clipped a radio to my chest, even though I knew nobody was on the other end. I grabbed the keys, the heavy brass ring that held the access to $200 million of real estate. We took the UTV, the side-by-side utility vehicle with tank treads instead of wheels. It roared to life, the engine noise shattering the peace of the morning. I drove us up the winding switchbacks toward the main lodge, the Summit House. Silver Pine is laid out like a wheel. The Summit House is the hub, and the 5 other estates are the spokes. The Summit House is massive, 10,000 square feet of glass and timber. It holds the central server room, the medical bay, and the industrial kitchen. We parked under the portico. The automatic lights didn't trigger. The motion sensors were dead. "That's wrong," I muttered. The battery backup should have caught the exterior lighting. I used the master key on the heavy oak front door. We stepped into the atrium. Usually, this place smells like lemon polish and money. Today, It smelled like cold, stagnant air. The silence inside was different than the silence outside. It was the silence of a machine that had stopped breathing. I clicked on my flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the vaulted ceiling and the massive stone fireplace. "Check the medical bay," I told Sarah. "See if the refrigeration units are running. If the vaccines and meds warm up, we're in trouble." "On it," she said, moving efficiently toward the west wing. I headed for the basement, to the server room and the power distribution center. My boots squeaked on the marble floor. I descended the steel stairs into the belly of the beast. The server room was usually a deafening hive of cooling fans and blinking green lights. Now, it was dark. The only light came from the emergency red LEDs on the UPS, the uninterruptible power supply. I looked at the main panel. The display was dark. I pressed the manual override. Nothing. The batteries were drained. That didn't make sense. The transfer switch had thrown an hour ago. The power walls should have held the load for days, even without solar input. I opened the breaker panel. The smell hit me then. Ozone. Melted plastic. The sharp, acrid scent of fried electronics. I shone my light onto the bus bar. It was black. Charred. The copper wiring had melted into a slag. This wasn't a power outage. This was a surge. A massive, violent push of energy that had blown through the surge protectors like they were tissue paper. "Fry," I whispered. I didn't know if it was an EMP, a solar flare, or a cyber attack on the grid that caused a feedback loop, but the result was the same. The brains of the house were dead. I ran back up the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. Sarah! I found her in the hallway outside the med bay. She was holding a digital thermometer. "The fridges are off," she said. "Temp is rising." I'm moving the insulin and the epinephrine to cooler bags. But Elias, the electronic locks on the pharmacy cabinet, they're dead. I had to use the pry bar to get them open. "The system is cooked," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We have a catastrophic failure in the main relays. Can you fix it?" "I can bypass it," I said. "I can wire the solar array directly to the essential circuits, stripping out the computer controls. But it's going to take time, and we need to know if this is just us, or—" I stopped. We both knew what "or" meant. We walked out to the massive deck of the summit house. From here, on a clear day, you can see down the valley to the town of Clear Creek, about 30 miles away. Usually, you can't see the town itself, but you can see the haze of it, the highway lights, the cell towers blinking on the distant ridges. The storm was clearing slightly, leaving a window of visibility. I raised my binoculars. Sarah stood next to me, her breath fogging in the air. I scanned the horizon. Nothing. No highway lights. No blinking red aviation warnings on the radio towers. No faint glow of civilization reflecting off the clouds. Just gray. Gray mountains, white snow, and black forest. "It's everywhere," I said, lowering the glasses. Sarah took them from me. She looked for a long time. Then she lowered them slowly. "The owners," she said. "They have planes. Helicopters. If this is a global thing, they'll be coming. This is what they built this place for. The bug-out location. Maybe," I said, "if their planes can fly. If their pilots showed up." We stood there for a minute, the wind biting through our layers. We were standing on millions of dollars of real estate, surrounded by enough freeze-dried food to feed a battalion, and I had never felt more exposed in my life. "We need to secure the gate," I said. The main gate down by our cabin was a heavy iron slider, operated by an electric motor. If the power was fried, it was just a fence. "We go back down," I told her. "We lock the manual deadbolts. Then we come back up here and we start triage. We need to save the food and the meds before the cold ruins them." We drove the UTV back down the mountain in silence. The snow was getting deeper, 6 inches now. The tracks of the vehicle were the only mark on the pristine white surface. When we got back to the caretaker's cabin, the reality of the situation started to set in. Our little house was cooling down. The electric baseboard heaters were stone cold. "Fire," Sarah said. She dropped her keys on the table and went straight to the wood stove in the corner. "We need heat before the pipes burst." I watched her for a second. She was shaking, just a little, not from cold, but from adrenaline crash. She grabbed the kindling, her movements sharp and practiced. She was compartmentalizing, focusing on the immediate task so she didn't have to think about her sister in Seattle or her parents in Florida. I went to the mudroom and grabbed the heavy chain and the padlock we used for locking up the heavy machinery. I walked out to the main gate. The electric keypad was dark. I disengaged the motor arm and pushed the heavy iron gate shut by hand. It groaned, metal on metal, a sound that echoed too loudly in the valley. I wrapped the chain around the vertical bars and the post, snapping the padlock shut. It felt flimsy, a chain-link fence against the end of the world. I stood there, looking down the service road that disappeared into the timber. Usually, I checked this road for FedEx trucks or incoming guests. Now, I was looking for what? Refugees? Looters? The owners? The snow was falling vertically now. No wind. The silence was absolute. No hum of electricity. No distant planes. Just the blood rushing in my ears. I turned back to the cabin. Smoke was curling from the chimney, a grey ribbon against the white sky. I walked inside. The fire was crackling. Sarah had the camp stove set up on the kitchen counter and was boiling water. "We have a problem," she said, not looking up from the pot. "Which one?" I asked, hanging my coat. "The water pump is electric," she said. "The pressure tank has maybe 10 gallons left. After that, the faucets run dry." I nodded. "I can rig a hand pump from the shed. But for now, we melt snow. We have fuel. The propane tank is at 80%, she said, and we have 2 cords of wood stacked on the porch. Good. That gets us through 2 months if we're careful. And then?" she asked. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were dark, pupils dilated. "And then we see if the billionaires show up," I said. "Because if they don't, all that food in the Summit House, it doesn't belong to them anymore." She stared at me. "That's looting, Elias. That's surviving, Sarah." We didn't speak for a while. We drank tea, huddled near the stove. The light outside began to fade, the grey turning to charcoal, then to black. I went to the window one last time before we closed the blackout curtains. The world was pitch black. No moon, no stars, just a void. "Elias." Sarah's voice was soft from the couch. "Yeah. Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" "Listen." I held my breath. I strained my ears against the crackle of the fire. At first, nothing. Then, faint, carried on the air currents from miles down the valley. A sound. Pop, pop, pop. 3 distinct cracks. Flat and dry. Gunfire. It was distant, maybe 10 miles away, down near the county road junction. But up here, sound travels. Hunters. Sarah asked, but she knew the answer. Not at night, I said. Not 3 rapid shots. I walked over and checked the lock on the front door. I slid the deadbolt home. Then I went to the gun safe and pulled out the scoped rifle and the shotgun. I laid them on the dining table. I took the box of cleaning supplies and started to wipe off the factory oil, replacing it with cold-weather lubricant. "What are we doing?" Sarah asked. "We're starting a watch rotation," I said. 2 hours on, 2 hours off. Nobody comes through that gate unless we know them. She looked at the guns, then at the dark window, then back at me. She didn't argue. She just stood up, went to her medical bag, and pulled out a notebook. "Okay," she said. "If we're doing this, we need an inventory. Calories, fuel, ammo, meds. I'm not dying because we forgot to count the beans." I smiled, a grim, tight expression. "No, we're not." That was the first night. The night the lights went out and the timeline broke. We sat in the dark, watching the snow bury the only road out, listening to the silence of a dead world, waiting for morning. We thought the cold was going to be the enemy. We were wrong. The cold is honest. It just wants to lower your temperature. The real enemy was wondering who fired those shots down in the valley, and wondering when they would realize that there was a castle full of food sitting at the top of the mountain, guarded by just 2 tired people and a chain-link fence. The sun didn't rise on the first morning. The sky just transitioned from black to a bruised, heavy slate. The storm had parked itself over the Cascades, a low-pressure ceiling that felt solid enough to touch. I had taken the second watch, from 4 to 8 o'clock. I sat in the wingback chair by the front window of the cabin, the rifle resting across my knees. I didn't sleep. I just watched the snow stack up against the chain-link fence. 4 inches became 8. 8 became 12. The service road, our lifeline to the valley, was disappearing. It was smoothing out, erasing the ruts and the gravel until it looked just like the forest floor, white, undulating, and impassable. Sarah came out of the bedroom wrapped in a quilt, her hair messy, eyes puffy. She didn't say, "Good morning." That phrase belonged to the old world. She just asked, "Any movement?" "Just the wind," I said. "And a coyote about an hour ago. He didn't like the fence." She walked to the wood stove and held her hands over the cast-iron top. The fire had burned down to coals. "It's freezing in here, Elias. The insulation in this cabin. It's meant for weekends, not winter sieges." She was right. The caretaker's cabin was charming, but it was essentially a plywood box. We could keep it warm if we fed the stove every hour, but we were burning through our woodpile at a rate that made me nervous. "We need to go back up," I said, standing up and feeling my knees pop. "To the Summit House." "The road is gone," she said, looking out the window. "The UTV has tracks," I reminded her. "We can make it. We have to. If we stay down here, we burn all our wood in 3 weeks. Up there, the thermal mass of those lodges will hold heat for days even without power. And they have the reserves." "We're moving in?" she asked. It wasn't an objection, just a clarification of the boundary we were crossing. "We're establishing a forward operating base," I said, using the terminology from a job site I managed for a paranoid tech CEO years ago. "Pack a bag. Essentials only. If we have to come back down fast, I don't want to be hauling luggage." The drive up the mountain was a fight. The UTV, a beast of a machine-painted matte black, churned through the drifts, the tracks throwing rooster tails of heavy, wet snow. The engine roared, struggling against the incline. I drove by feel mostly. The wide-out conditions meant I couldn't see the edge of the service road, just the dark line of the trees on either side. One slip, and we'd slide 200 feet into the ravine. Sarah sat next to me, gripping the grab handle until her knuckles were white. She watched the tree line, scanning for movement. We were both jumpy. That gunfire from the night before was still echoing in our heads. When we crested the ridge and rolled into the central compound, it looked like a mausoleum. The 6 lodges stood in a semicircle, massive structures of stone and cedar, staring out over the clouds with dead, dark windows. These houses were built to impress. They had heated driveways, copper gutters, and slate roofs imported from Vermont. Now, they were just expensive caves. I pulled the UTV up to the service entrance of the Summit House. The silence up here was even deeper than at the gate. It felt pressurized. "First things first," I said, killing the engine. "We need to stabilize the temperature inside. If the pipes in the slab freeze, they'll burst. Then we have a flood, then we have black mold, and then this place becomes uninhabitable." We went to the utility room. This was my domain. I knew every wire and pipe in this building because I'd spent the last 6 months yelling at the contractors who installed them. The smell of burnt ozone was still there, faint but sharp. The main inverter for the solar array was toast. A brick. But the panels on the roof. Silicon and glass. They were dumb technology. They shouldn't be affected by a surge unless it was a direct lightning strike. "Grab the tool bag," I told Sarah. "I need the multimeter and the wire strippers." "What's the plan?" she asked, handing me the fluke meter. "The brains are fried," I said, pointing to the blackened circuit board. "But the heart is still pumping. The panels are generating DC current. The batteries are dead because the charge controller won't let them fill. I'm going to bypass the computer. I'm going to run a direct line from the array into the emergency heating circuit." "Is that safe?" "No," I said, clamping a wire in my teeth to strip the insulation. "It's incredibly dangerous. Without a regulator, if the sun comes out hard, we could overvoltage the heaters and start a fire. But right now, with this cloud cover, we're getting maybe 20% output. It should be just enough to warm the floor coils without melting the wires." For the next 2 hours, I was a surgeon. I cut thick-gauge copper cables, twisted them together, and taped them with heavy rubber splicing tape. My fingers were numb. The utility room was barely 40 degrees. I worked by the light of a headlamp, cursing when I dropped a screw, sweating despite the cold. Sarah stood guard at the door. She wasn't watching the wires. She was watching the hallway. Every creak of the house settling under the snow load made her flinch. "Done," I said finally. I wiped my hands on my pants. Moment of truth. I threw the manual disconnect switch. Thunk. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a low, magnetic hum started in the wall. The radiant floor heating manifold clicked. A pressure gauge needle wiggled. "It's not much," I said, watching the meter. "But it's pulling 40 amps. That's enough to keep the place above freezing. It buys us time." "Time for what?" Sarah asked. "Time to see what they left us." We moved to the kitchen. If you've never been in a kitchen designed for a billionaire's doomsday retreat, it's hard to describe. It wasn't just a kitchen. It was a cathedral of stainless steel. 2 sub-zero fridges, 2 walk-in pantries, and a wine cellar that locked with a biometric scanner. The biometric scanner was dead, obviously. I looked at the heavy steel door of the dry goods pantry. "This is it, Sarah. Once we open this, there's no going back. We are stealing from the members." She looked at me, her face pale in the beam of my flashlight. "Elias," I haven't heard a plane. I haven't heard a chopper. The phone is dead. The radio is static. They aren't coming. We don't know that. I know it, she said, her voice hardening. I know how triage works. You save what you can. You don't save empty rooms. She stepped forward and put her hand on the door handle. It was locked. Do you have the master override? She asked. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the physical key ring. The skeleton key. It was an old-fashioned, long-stemmed brass key that bypassed the electronic solenoids. I slid it into the lock. It turned with a smooth, heavy click. I pulled the door open. The beam of my flashlight played over the shelves, floor to ceiling. It was overwhelming. There were no boxes of generic emeries. There were no buckets of cheap wheat. This was luxury survival. Jars of confit duck legs. Vacuum-sealed wheels of Parmesan cheese. Cases of freeze-dried organic vegetables. Bags of artisanal coffee beans. There were crates of wine, expensive Bordeaux, stacked next to boxes of ammunition. "My God," Sarah whispered. She picked up a jar of honey. It was heavy, golden, local. "There's enough here for 50 people for a year. And there's 2 of us," I said. The guilt hit me then. Not for stealing. Survival kills shame pretty fast. But the guilt of class. I thought about the people in the town down in the valley. The waitress at the diner where we got breakfast on Sundays. The guy who fixed my truck. They were down there in the dark, probably fighting over bread and milk at the grocery outlet, while we were standing in a vault filled with duck confit. "We ration it," Sarah said, interrupting my thoughts. She was already in nurse mode. "We don't gorge. We inventory. We treat this like a pharmacy. Everything gets counted. And we don't touch the alcohol," I added. "Not yet. We need clear heads." She nodded, placing the honey back on the shelf. "Agreed. But Elias, look at this." She pointed to the back wall of the pantry. There was a gun rack. Silver Pine wasn't just a retreat. It was a fortress. The rack held 4 rifles. High-end, tactical platforms. Suppressors. Thermal optics. "They expected trouble," I said, walking over. I picked one up. It was light, carbon fiber. "They didn't build this place for a storm. They built it for a war." "We should take them," Sarah said. "Move them to the caretaker cabin? Or keep them here?" "We stay here," I decided right then. "The cabin is indefensible. It's glass and wood. This place? The walls are reinforced concrete faced with stone. The doors are solid oak. We move our personal gear up here. We live in the staff quarters behind the kitchen. It's smaller, easier to heat. And the gate. I go down twice a day," I said. "Check the perimeter. Keep the lock secure. But we sleep here. We spent the afternoon moving in. We didn't touch the master suites. It felt wrong to sleep in the owners' beds with the Egyptian cotton sheets. We set up cots in the staff lounge. It felt more like us. As night fell, the storm finally broke. The clouds tore apart, revealing a moon that was shockingly bright against the snow. We were sitting in the main atrium, wrapped in blankets. The floor was faintly warm now. My wiring job was holding. We had boiled water on a camping stove and made a dinner of freeze-dried risotto. It tasted like guilt and victory. "I'm going to try the ham radio again," I said. The Summit House had a communications room on the top floor. A true radio shack. I climbed the stairs, the moonlight casting long, skeletal shadows through the massive windows. I sat at the desk. The backup battery for the radio was separate from the main grid, a small 12-volt marine battery. It still had juice. I flipped the switch. The radio crackled to life. Static. The sound of the universe screaming. I scanned the bands. AM. FM. Shortwave. Silence. 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 Then, on the emergency frequency, 146.520, I heard it. It wasn't a voice. It was a beacon. A repeating digital burst. Screech, pause, screech. I knew that sound. It was an automated position marker. An ELT, emergency locator transmitter. Sarah! I yelled down the stairs. She came running, a pistol in her hand. What? What is it? Listen. I turned up the gain. Screech, pause, screech. What is that? It's a crash beacon, I said, my stomach dropping. Aircraft down. Where? The signal strength is weak, I said, watching the needle bounce. But it's clear. Line of sight. It's not in the valley. It's high up. I turned to the window, looking out toward the jagged peaks to the north. The Razor's Edge Ridge. If the owners tried to fly in during the storm, I said, the realization washing over me cold and heavy. If they tried to beat the weather. They crashed, Sarah finished the sentence. We stared out at the moonlit peaks. Somewhere out there, buried in 10 feet of snow, was a twisted piece of metal, and inside that metal might be the people who owned the food we just ate. If they survived. Sarah started. They didn't, I said. Not in that storm. Not on that ridge. But if they did. She pushed. If there are survivors, Elias. They're our employers. They're people. I looked at the map on the wall. The crash site would be 5 miles away, across terrain that was treacherous in summer and suicide in winter. We can't get to them, I said. The UTV can't climb the Razor. It's vertical rock. We have snowshoes, she said. We have thermal optics now. We have medical gear. I looked at her. She wasn't asking. She was telling me who she was. She was a healer. She couldn't sit in a warm room eating risotto while a beacon screamed for help 5 miles away. It's a suicide mission, Sarah. It's a rescue mission, she corrected. And if we don't go, we aren't caretakers. We're just squatters. I looked back at the radio. The screeching was relentless. It was a heartbeat. We wait for first light, I said, resigning myself to the insanity of it. We pack heavy. If the weather turns, we dig a snow cave. But Sarah, if we get there and they're dead, we take their comms codes. We take their keys. We take everything. Deal, she said. She walked away to start packing the medical kits. I sat there listening to the beacon. Screech, pause, screech. It sounded like a ghost knocking on the door. I turned off the radio to save the battery, but the sound didn't stop in my head. I looked out at the frozen world. The valley below was dead. The sky above was empty. And somewhere in the middle, on a knife edge of granite, something was waiting for us. I checked the magazine on the rifle. Full. I had a bad feeling that the cold wasn't the only thing waiting on the Razor, because if a billionaire's plane goes down, it's not just full of people. It's full of secrets. And sometimes other people go looking for those secrets too. Dawn was a rumor. That's the only way to describe it. The sky didn't turn blue. It just diluted from black ink to a dirty wash-water grey. The storm had left behind a world that felt muffled, like we were moving inside a layer of cotton wool. We prepped in the mudroom of the summit house. It was 6 o'clock. The temperature outside was 12 degrees. I watched Sarah pack the medical sled. It's a specialized piece of gear, a rigid orange plastic shell that drags behind you on a harness. Usually, it's for hauling firewood or elk quarters. Today, she was lining it with thermal blankets and trauma pads. "If there's a survivor," she said, her voice tight, "hypothermia is the killer. We have to wrap them instantly. The golden hour is gone. We're in the platinum minute." I didn't have the heart to tell her that after 12 hours in sub-freezing temperatures, nobody survives without a heat source. I just nodded and checked the rifle. It was a Christensen Arms carbon fiber bolt action, chambered in .300 PRC. A sniper's round. The optic was a Leupold thermal scope. I'd never fired it, but I knew the mechanics. I slung it over my chest, barrel down, and strapped a heavy revolver to my hip. It felt heavy, not just in pounds, but in implication. We weren't just caretakers anymore. We were an armed patrol. "Snowshoes," I said, pointing to the wall. "The drifts on the north face will be waist deep." We stepped out the service door. The cold didn't hit you. It squeezed you. It found the gap between your scarf and your goggles. It made your nose hairs freeze instantly. The silence was absolute. No birds. No wind. Just the massive, looming presence of the mountains. "Lead the way," Sarah said. We moved in single file. I broke trail. Breaking trail in deep powder is brutal work. You lift your leg high, stomp down, slide, and repeat. Your heart rate hits 160 within minutes. You sweat inside your layers, and that sweat is dangerous. If you stop moving, it freezes against your skin. We headed north, away from the compound, toward the razor's edge. It's a jagged spine of granite that separates our valley from the desolate wilderness to the north. The crash beacon was still screaming in my earpiece, a rhythmic digital pulse that grew louder with every mile. For the first hour, we didn't speak. The only sound was the crump hiss of the snowshoes and our own ragged breathing. The forest was dense here, old-growth hemlock and cedar, their branches bowing under the weight of the snow. It felt like walking through a cathedral built by giants. "Hold up," I wheezed, stopping to lean against a tree. I checked the GPS unit. "We're 2 miles out. Elevation gain is about to get nasty." Sarah stopped behind me. Her face was flushed, her breath puffing in white clouds. She took a sip from her hydration bladder. "I don't hear an engine," she said. "What?" If anyone survived, they'd try to run the APU, the Auxiliary Power Unit, or start a fire. "I don't smell smoke." "The wind is blowing away from us," I reasoned, though I knew she was right. We pushed on. The trees began to thin out as we hit the alpine zone. The snow here was wind-scoured, harder, crusted with ice. It made walking easier but louder. Crunch, crunch, crunch. And then we smelled it. It wasn't wood smoke. It was a chemical smell. Sharp, oily, and unnatural. Jet fuel. Burnt plastic. And underneath that, the copper tang of hot metal. "We're close," I said. I unslung the rifle, flipping the safety off. We crested a small rise and saw the razor's edge. The crash site was a scar on the perfection of the snow. It looked like a giant hand had swiped the side of the mountain. Trees were sheared off mid-trunk, splintered like toothpicks. A long, black trench had been gouged into the earth, leading up to the wreckage. It wasn't a small plane. It was a helicopter, a Sikorsky S-76. the kind of machine corporate executives used to commute from Manhattan to the Hamptons. It was lying on its side, the main rotor blades shattered and twisted like dead spider legs. The tail boom was snapped off, resting 50 yards down the slope. It wasn't burning anymore, but wisps of black smoke were still curling up from the engine cowling. "Oh, God," Sarah whispered. She didn't wait for me. She unclipped from the sled and started running, or trying to run, toward the fuselage. "Sarah, wait," I hissed. "Perimeter." But she was already moving. I cursed and followed, sweeping the tree line with the scope. Nothing but cold rocks and snow. We reached the fuselage. The cockpit glass was shattered. The side door, the sliding VIP entrance, had been ripped off the hinges. Sarah climbed up the slanted floor of the cabin. I stayed at the door, rifle raised. "Talk to me," I said. "3 souls on board," she called out. Her voice was flat, professional. The medic mask was on. "Pilot, co-pilot, 1 passenger in the back. Status." She paused. "Pilot and co-pilot are gone. Blunt force trauma. The cockpit crushed on impact." She moved deeper into the cabin, climbing over the leather captain's chairs that were hanging sideways. "The passenger," she started, then stopped. "Sarah, Elias, get in here." I lowered the rifle and climbed inside. The interior was trashed, luggage scattered, an iPad smashed on the bulkhead, a crystal decanter broken on the floor. The passenger was strapped into a rear-facing seat. He was a man in his 50s. Expensive parka, cashmere scarf. I recognized him. It was Mr. Sterling, the owner of Lodge 4, Tech Venture Capital, the guy who installed the heated driveway. He was dead, but he didn't look like the pilots. He was slumped forward, held by the harness. His skin was waxy and blue. "He didn't die in the crash," Sarah said. She pointed to his abdomen. The parka was soaked in dark, frozen blood, but there was no shrapnel, no torn metal. "Is that—" I leaned in. "Gunshot," she said. "Close range. Look at the stippling on the fabric." I stared at the wound. She was right. He'd been shot in the gut. "Before the crash?" I asked. "Had to be," she said. "If he was shot after, there wouldn't be this much blood loss. The heart has to be pumping to bleed like this." He bled out before the bird went down. I looked toward the cockpit. "The pilots. Trauma," she repeated. "But—" She climbed back toward the front. "Elias, look at the instrument panel." I followed her gaze. The console was destroyed, but the overhead panel was intact. There were bullet holes in the plexiglass windshield. Incoming fire. "They were shot down," I said. The realization made the hair on my arms stand up. This wasn't the storm. Someone engaged them. I scrambled back to the open door and raised the rifle again, scanning the ridge line frantically. If they were shot down, whoever shot them might still be out there. Or worse, coming to check their kill. "We need to leave," I said. "Now. Grab the comms codes if you can find them. Check his pockets for keys." Sarah was going through Sterling's jacket. She wasn't looting. She was looking for answers. She pulled out a wallet, a satellite phone, crushed, and a heavy, waterproof Pelican case that was handcuffed to his left wrist. "He's attached to it," she said. "Do we have the bolt cutters?" "No. Trauma shears won't cut steel cuffs." I looked at Mr. Sterling's frozen hand. I looked at the case. It was black, unmarked, about the size of a laptop. We take the whole thing, I said. We don't have time to be delicate. Elias. We are exposed, Sarah. Someone shot a helicopter out of the sky. We are standing in the kill zone. She nodded, grimaced, and handled it. I won't describe what she had to do to get the cuff off the wrist. She's a nurse. She understands anatomy. It was quick, respectful, and necessary. She grabbed the case. I grabbed a flare gun from the survival kit on the wall. Let's go, I said. We scrambled out of the wreckage. The wind was picking up again, swirling the snow around the crash site. I took one last look at the fuselage. On the tail section, barely visible through the soot, were holes. Distinct, jagged punctures. Small arms, I muttered. Someone on the ground opened up on them as they came over the ridge. We hooked up the sled, now carrying the pelican case instead of a survivor, and turned back toward the tree line. "Wait," Sarah said. She froze. "What?" "The beacon." I listened. The screech-pause screech in my ear. "It stopped," she said. I tapped my earpiece. Silence. Just the static of the dead airwaves. "Battery died?" I hoped. "ELTs last for days," she said. "We heard it strong 5 minutes ago. It didn't fade out, Elias. It cut. There are only 2 reasons a crash beacon stops. The battery dies, or someone turns it off, and the switch is inside the cockpit." I spun around, bringing the thermal scope up to my eye. I scanned the wreckage we had just left. The cockpit was empty. The bodies were where we left them. I scanned the ridge above the crash site. The razor. There. 300 yards up. A white-hot bloom in the grey scale of the thermal scope. A heat signature. It was prone, lying flat behind a rock outcropping. It was the size of a man. And next to it, a long, thin line of heat. A rifle barrel. "Contact," I whispered. "High ridge. 11 o'clock." Sarah didn't ask questions. She dropped flat into the snow behind the sled. "Did they see us?" she hissed. "They turned off the beacon," I said. "They were waiting for us to leave the wreck. They wanted to see if we found the case." The heat signature moved. It sat up. I saw an arm raise. A wave. No, a signal. To someone else. I swung the scope to the right. 2 more heat signatures were coming out of the tree line on the east flank. They were moving fast. On skis. "We're being flanked," I said. My voice sounded calm, which terrified me. I was watching my own death in black and white. "They aren't rescue. They're the ones who shot down the bird. Can we outrun them?" Sarah asked. "Not in snowshoes. Not against skis." I looked at the terrain. We were in a shallow bowl. The tree line was 200 yards away. If we made the trees, we had cover. If we stayed here, we were ducks in a barrel. "When I shoot," I told Sarah, "you run. You run for the trees, and you don't look back. You drag that case like your life depends on it. Elias, you can't." "I'm going to suppress them," I said. "I have the high ground advantage on the skiers, but the sniper on the ridge has me pinned. I have to keep his head down." I settled the crosshairs on the heat signature on the ridge. I ranged it. 320 yards. Uphill angle. I breathed in. The cold air burned my throat. "Go," I whispered. I squeezed the trigger. The recoil slammed into my shoulder. Through the scope, I saw the rock in front of the sniper explode. He flinched, rolling back. "Move!" I screamed. Sarah scrambled up, hauling the sled, churning through the snow. I traversed the rifle to the right. The skiers were closing in. They wore white camo. I couldn't see them with my naked eye, only through the thermal. They were ghosts. I fired again. A warning shot in front of the lead skier. He didn't stop. He raised a weapon. Automatic fire erupted from the tree line. Tack, 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 tack. Bullets whipped past us, snapping the air. They weren't warning shots. We were in a firefight, on top of the world, with people we couldn't see, fighting for a briefcase we couldn't open. I fired a third shot, dropping the lead skier. He crumpled. The second one dove for cover. I turned and ran, my lungs burning, chasing Sarah into the shadows of the hemlocks. We had the package. Now we just had to survive the trip home. The tree line was only 200 yards away, but it felt like crossing an ocean. When you run in deep snow, the physics of your own body turn against you. The snowshoes, which were lifesavers 10 minutes ago, became anchors. Every step was a heavy, clumsy lunge. I could hear the snap hiss of bullets cutting the air above us. They didn't sound like movie gunshots. They sounded like angry insects buzzing past our ears. "Don't look back," I yelled, though the wind snatched the words away before they reached Sarah. She was 10 feet ahead of me, head down, hauling the orange sled with a strength I didn't know she had. The pelican case bounced inside it, slamming against the plastic sides. That noise, thump, 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 sounded like a dinner bell ringing out across the valley. We hit the tree line. The transition was instant. 1 second we were exposed on the white sheet of the alpine bowl, naked to the thermal scope on the ridge. The next, we were swallowed by the gloom of the old-growth hemlocks. The light dropped by 50%. The trees here were massive, ancient columns of bark that blocked the wind and, more importantly, blocked the line of fire. "Keep moving." I grabbed Sarah's harness, pushing her deeper into the dense brush. "We need deadfall. We need thick cover." We scrambled over a fallen cedar trunk, the size of a school bus, and collapsed into the hollow on the other side. "Stay down," I hissed. We lay there in the snow, chests heaving, lungs burning like we'd inhaled broken glass. The silence rushed back in to fill the space where the gunfire had been. But now, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was pregnant. It was waiting. Sarah ripped off her goggles. Her eyes were wide, pupils blown out with adrenaline. "You shot someone," she whispered. It wasn't an accusation. It was a status check on reality. "I hit the lead skier," I said, trying to steady my hands to check the action on the rifle. "The sniper on the ridge is pinned for a minute, but he'll be radioing our position. The second skier is loose." "Who are they, Elias?" They were wearing white. They had automatic weapons. I peeked over the top of the rotting log, scanning our back trail. They aren't locals. They aren't looters from the valley. Looters don't have thermal optics and matching winter camo. They're a retrieval team. "For the survivors?" "For the box," I said, looking at the black pelican case in the sled. "They shot down the helicopter to get what's in that case. And now we have it." We were in a tactical nightmare. We were tracking fresh snow, leaving a trail a blind man could follow. We were heavy, tired, and moving slow. They were on skis, likely light, and trained for this. "We can't go back to the summit house," I said. The realization tasted like ash. "What?" "All our supplies are there. The walls, the heat. If we go back there, we lead a hit squad right to our front door. They'll siege us. They'll burn us out." I looked at her. We have to lose them out here. In the woods. Lose them. In snow. She gestured to the deep fur we had carved coming in. We use the terrain, I said, my project manager brain finally overriding the panic. The creek. Rattlesnake Creek runs at the bottom of this drainage. It's fast water. It won't be fully frozen. If we can get into the water, we stop leaving tracks. We break the trail. That's a mile down, she said. And if we get wet? If we get wet, we risk hypothermia. If we stay here, we catch a bullet. Pick your poison. We moved out. But we changed our pace. No more running. Running makes noise. We moved in a tactical walk, knees bent, rolling the foot, stepping carefully to avoid snapping dry branches. I took the rear guard. Every 50 yards, I stopped and scanned behind us with the thermal scope. The woods were a monochrome maze. The heat signature of the second skier hadn't appeared yet. That worried me more than seeing him. It meant he was good. He was flanking wide, trying to get ahead of us, or he was waiting for the sniper to reposition. We descended into the drainage. The slope got steeper. The trees grew tighter together. "Wait," Sarah whispered, halting suddenly. She held up a hand. We froze. Above the sound of our own breathing and the distant creaking of trees, there was a new sound. Zzzzzzzzzzz. High-pitched. Electric. Like a mosquito the size of a hawk. "Drone," I breathed. I grabbed Sarah and pulled her tight against the trunk of a massive fir tree. "Don't move. Don't look up." The sound grew louder. It was hovering. Hunting. This confirmed everything. These weren't just mercenaries. They were high-tech. They had surveillance assets. "Thermal?" Sarah asked, her face pressed against the rough bark. "Definitely. The canopy is thick here, though. The needles hold heat. It scatters the signature. If we stay still, we look like part of the tree." The drone buzzed directly overhead. It lingered, a malevolent mechanical eye searching for the warmth of our blood. I squeezed the grip of my rifle. If I shot it, I gave away our position instantly. If I didn't, it might spot us anyway. It hovered for 30 seconds, an eternity, and then the whine faded as it moved south, down the draw. "They think we ran downhill fast," I whispered. "They're projecting our path." "We are going downhill," Sarah noted. "Change of plan," I said. "We don't go to the creek yet. We traverse. We cut across the slope, stay under the heaviest canopy. We make them think we vanished." We spent the next 2 hours in a slow-motion hell. Traversing a steep slope in snowshoes is agony. Your ankles scream. The sled kept trying to slide downhill, pulling Sarah off balance. I had to tie a rope to the back of the sled and act as a brake, walking behind her. The sun, what little there was of it, was starting to dip. The temperature was dropping. My sweat was starting to feel cold and clammy against my back. "Elias," Sarah said. She was leaning against a rock, trembling. "I need sugar. I'm crashing." We huddled under a rock overhang. It was a small, dry space protected from the snow. We broke out a nutrient bar, a dense block of oats and chocolate meant for endurance athletes. It was frozen hard as a brick. We had to gnaw on it. "We have to open the case," Sarah said, chewing slowly. "Not here." "I need to know what we're dying for," she argued. "Is it money? Intel? Codes? If it's just diamonds or cash, Elias." We leave it. We leave it on a stump and we walk away. Let them have it. She was right. If it was just greed, I wasn't willing to take a bullet for Mr. Sterling's retirement fund. "Okay," I said. "Let's check." I pulled the pelican case onto my lap. It was heavy, maybe 20 pounds. It had a pressure release valve and 2 heavy latches. No keypad, just a key lock, which Sarah had already bypassed when she removed it from the owner. I popped the latches. They snapped open loudly in the quiet woods. I lifted the lid. Inside, there was dense foam padding, and nestled in the foam were 3 things. First, a hard drive, ruggedized, military-grade, silver and unlabeled. Second, a glass vial inside a metal shock tube. The liquid inside was clear, viscous. Third, a laminated card. It wasn't a bank card. It had the seal of the Department of Defense, but overlaid with a logo I didn't recognize, a stylized tree with a lightning bolt through it. The name on the card wasn't Mr. Sterling. It was Dr. Eris Thorne. Clearance level. Omni. "That's not money," Sarah whispered, staring at the vial. "No," I said, a cold dread pooling in my stomach that had nothing to do with the weather. "That's a biosample. And a data core. Is it the cause?" she asked. "The reason everything went dark? Or the cure?" I said. "Or a weapon?" I looked at the hard drive. Mr. Sterling wasn't just a venture capitalist. He was a courier. He was moving something that didn't belong on a flight plan. I slammed the case shut and latched it. "We can't leave it," I said. "If the people chasing us are willing to shoot down a helicopter to get this, they aren't going to let witnesses live. Even if we give it to them, they'll scrub us." "So we're stuck with it," Sarah said, her voice hollow. "We're leverage," I corrected. "As long as we have this, we have a card to play. But we have to get back to the compound. We need the walls. We need the comms gear in the Summit House to see if we can read that drive. How do we get back without leading them there?" I looked at the map on my GPS. "The mining tunnel," I said. Sarah looked at me like I was crazy. "The Silver King mine? That collapsed in the 80s. The main adit collapsed," I said. "But the ventilation shaft on the North Ridge. I found it last summer when I was scouting for a new water source. It drops down into the drift. The drift comes out near the maintenance shed behind the compound. You want to go underground? They have drones," I said, pointing at the sky. "They have thermal snipers. They own the surface. The only way we move without being seen is to go underneath them. Elias, that mine is unstable. It's full of water and rot. And it's invisible," I said. "It's a mile east. If we make it to the vent shaft before dark, we can disappear from the map. They'll lose our track at the shaft and think we kept going." She looked at the sled, then at the darkening woods, then at me. "Lead the way," she said. We packed up. I took the sled this time. The weight of the pelican case felt different now. It didn't feel like luggage. It felt like a bomb. We moved east. The snow was getting harder, a crust forming as the temperature plummeted. We were 500 yards from the mine entrance when I stopped. Through the trees, I saw movement. Not heat. Color. White fabric moving against a dark tree trunk. The second skier. He was below us, moving parallel. He hadn't seen us yet, but he was cutting for our track. He was predicting our move toward the mine. He knew the terrain. "Ambush," I whispered to Sarah. "He's setting up to intercept us at the ridge line." I looked at the rifle. I had 3 rounds left in the magazine. "He's between us and the tunnel," I said. We can't sneak past him. So we fight?" Sarah asked. Her hand was on the revolver at her hip. "No," I said. "We bait him." I unclipped the sled from my harness. "Take the case," I told her. "Put it in your pack. Leave the heavy stuff. Leave the blankets." "What are you doing?" "I'm going to send the sled down the ravine," I said. "It'll make noise. It'll make a track. He'll think we lost our footing and slid. He'll chase the target. And us. We wait for him to pass," I said, my voice cold. "And then we hunt the hunter." I positioned the sled at the top of a steep chute filled with loose shale and snow. I gave Sarah a nod. She shouldered her pack, the pelican case bulging against the fabric. I shoved the sled. It took off, gathering speed, crashing through the brush, loud and chaotic. Crash. Thump. Snap. We dropped flat behind a fallen log, rifles trained on the gap in the trees below. 10 seconds passed. The sled crashed into a tree far below. Then, movement. The white figure broke cover. He was fast. He turned his skis downhill, racking the slide on his rifle, chasing the noise. He skied right past us, 30 yards away. I saw his face for a split second. Night vision goggles. Balaclava. No hesitation. He disappeared down the slope. "Move," I whispered. "Now." We sprinted, actually sprinted this time, across the open gap toward the rocky outcrop where the mine shaft was hidden. We found the grate. It was rusted, covered in ice. I smashed the lock with the butt of my rifle. It clanged, a bell tolling in the twilight. I heaved the grate open. A smell drifted up, stagnant water, wet earth, and old iron. "Down," I said. "Go." Sarah slid into the dark hole without hesitation. I lowered the grate back into place, sprinkling fresh snow over the disturbed metal to hide our entry. Then I dropped into the blackness. We were out of the sky's view. But as my boots hit the muddy floor of the tunnel, I realized we had just traded one danger for another. We were trapped in a dark, collapsing hole with a bioweapon, and the only way out was a mile of rot and ruin. And above us, the man in white was finding an empty sled. The darkness inside the earth is different from the darkness of a night sky. Up there, even on a moonless night, there's ambient light, starlight, snow reflection, the memory of the sun. Down here, the darkness has mass. It presses against your eyes. It feels like it's trying to get inside your mouth and lungs. I clicked my headlamp to the lowest setting, a red filter to preserve our night vision and, more importantly, to keep us invisible if the grate above was breached. "Sarah," I whispered. The word didn't travel. It just died in the damp air. "I'm here," she replied. Her voice was shaking, vibrating with the adrenaline dump. "I'm right behind you." We were in a vertical shaft, standing on a rusted iron ladder that was bolted into the rock. The air smelled of wet copper, rotting wood, and something ancient and stale, the breath of a mountain that hadn't exhaled in 40 years. "Step where I step," I told her. "Test every rung before you put your weight on it. Iron rots in this humidity." We descended 30 feet. The ladder ended in a puddle of sludge that came up to our shins. This was the main drift, the horizontal tunnel that followed the vein of silver or deep into the ridge. "It's warmer," Sarah noted, wrapping her arms around herself. "Geothermal gradient," I muttered, playing the red beam of light over the walls. "It's 55 degrees down here year-round. It's the only reason we won't freeze to death." The tunnel was a nightmare of engineering failures. The original timber shoring, massive beams of Douglas fir, had turned into black sponges. They bowed inward, groaning under the unimaginable weight of the granite above. The floor was a slurry of mud and mine tailings. "We have a mile of this," I said, trying to sound confident. "Keep your head down. Watch for hanging rocks." We moved forward. Walking in muck is exhausting. It sucks at your boots, trying to pull them off your feet. Squelch. Step. Squelch. Step. Every 50 yards, I stopped and listened. I wasn't listening for the ghosts in white camo. They wouldn't follow us down here without specialized gear. I was listening for the mountain. In a mine this old, silence is good. Noise, creaking, popping, shifting, means the roof is coming down. "Elias," Sarah whispered after 20 minutes of trudging. "The case. It's buzzing." I stopped dead. "What?" "The pelican case. In my pack. I can feel it against my spine. A vibration." I turned around. "Let me see." She swung the pack off. We crouched in the mud. I put my hand on the hard plastic shell. She was right. A faint, high-frequency hum. And heat. The case was warm to the touch. The cooling unit, I realized. The vial inside. It's active. It has a battery-powered climate control system. It's working to keep the sample stable. "And if the battery dies?" Sarah asked, the nurse in her taking over. "If that vial warms up?" I looked at the black plastic box. "Then whatever is in there might degrade. Or wake up. Or leak. We need to get it to the Summit House," she said. "The med bay has stable refrigeration. We can transfer it." "Keep moving," I said. Double time. The urgency changed the rhythm of our march. We weren't just fleeing anymore. We were transporting a ticking clock. We hit the collapse zone about halfway through. The tunnel ahead was blocked by a pile of rubble, jagged boulders the size of engine blocks that had fallen from the ceiling. The path was choked off, leaving only a narrow gap near the top, right against the fractured roof. "We have to climb over," I said, shining the light into the gap. It was tight. A squeeze. "Is it stable?" Sarah asked. I looked at the rock pile. "It's settled. It fell a long time ago. But don't touch the ceiling timber as you go through. It's hanging by a thread." I went first. I scrambled up the slick rocks, pushing my pack ahead of me. I squeezed through the gap, my chest scraping the granite, the rotting wood inches from my face. I could see the fungal mycelium growing white and hairy on the timber. I slid down the other side and turned back. "Pass me the pack with the case first." Sarah shoved the backpack through the hole. I grabbed the straps and lowered it gently to the mud. Then Sarah started to crawl through. She was halfway through when it happened. Not a noise from the tunnel, but a noise from above. Whump. A dull, heavy concussion. It shook the dust loose from the ceiling. Pebbles rained down on my helmet. What was that? Sarah froze in the gap. "Explosion," I said, looking up at the solid rock. "Surface charge. They're blowing the mine entrance." "They know we're in here?" "No," I said, though my heart was hammering. "They're sealing the exits. They couldn't find our tracks, so they're closing the doors just in case." Creak. The timber above Sarah's head groaned. The vibration from the blast had shifted the load. "Sarah, move!" I yelled. "Now!" She scrambled, kicking her legs, pulling herself through. A rock the size of a basketball detached from the ceiling directly above her. I lunged forward, grabbing her jacket, and yanked her down the slope of the rubble pile. Crash! The rock slammed into the spot where her legs had been a second ago. A cloud of choking dust billowed out, blinding us. We scrambled backward, coughing, waving our hands. "Are you hit?" I hacked, spitting grit. "No," she wheezed. "I'm clear. I'm okay." We sat there for a second in the dark, the red light cutting through the swirling dust. The tunnel behind us, the way we came, was now effectively sealed. Even if we wanted to go back, we couldn't. "They just locked us in," Sarah said. Her voice was thin, teetering on panic. "No," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "They blocked the rear. The way forward is still open. The vent shaft to the compound is structural concrete. They can't blow that without seismic gear." "How much farther?" "Quarter mile. We're almost home." We got up. The march resumed, but the dynamic had shifted. The mountain felt hostile now. Every step felt like a trespass. The tunnel began to slope upward. The mud turned to dry, dusty rock. We were climbing out of the water table. "I see it," I said. Ahead, the tunnel ended in a concrete wall. Set into the wall was a heavy steel maintenance door, painted with fading yellow hazard stripes. This was the back door to Silver Pine. This door led to the sub-basement of the generator shed, the building that housed the massive diesel backups and the hydroelectric turbine controls. I reached the door. It had a wheel handle, like a bulkhead on a ship. "Please don't be rusted shut," I prayed. I grabbed the wheel with both hands. I braced my feet against the wall. I heaved. It didn't budge. "Help me," I grunted. Sarah grabbed the other side of the wheel. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. We strained. My shoulder, the one bruised from the rifle recoil, screamed in protest. The wheel groaned, a shriek of metal shearing off rust. It turned. 1 inch. Then 2. "Keep going." We spun the wheel until the latches disengaged. I pushed the door open. Fresh air hit us. Cold, dry, clean air. It smelled of diesel fuel and concrete dust, but after the mine, it smelled like perfume. We stumbled into the generator room. It was dimly lit by the emergency lighting, faint yellow LEDs. The massive yellow Caterpillar generators sat silent in rows, sleeping giants. I spun the wheel shut behind us and engaged the locking dogs. We were inside the perimeter. "We made it." Sarah slumped against a generator housing, sliding down to the floor. She hugged the backpack to her chest. "Not yet," I said. "We're in the shed. We still have to cross the courtyard to get to the summit house." I walked to the small window on the east wall of the shed. It was frosted over. I rubbed a circle of clarity with my thumb and peered out. It was night again, or close enough. The snow was falling lightly. The courtyard between us and the main lodge was open ground, about 50 yards of pristine, manicured landscaping buried in snow. And there were tracks in it. Fresh tracks. "Sarah," I whispered. "Lights out. Turn off your headlamp." "What is it?" "Someone is here." I stared through the peephole. The tracks weren't ours. They led from the main gate, which I had chained shut, straight to the front door of the summit house. The chain on the gate must have been cut. "The skiers?" Sarah asked, joining me at the window, peering into the gloom. "Maybe. Or the rest of their team." I looked at the summit house. It was dark, but on the second floor, in the master suite, a flicker, a flashlight beam moving past a window. "They're inside," I said. "They're inside our house." "Our supplies," Sarah hissed. "The med bay. The weapons cache in the pantry." "They have the high ground," I said, stepping back from the window. And they have the fortress. But we have the package, Sarah said, tapping the bag. And we know the tunnels. I looked around the generator room. This wasn't just a shed. It was the heart of the grid. We don't go out there, I said, a plan forming in the dark corners of my mind. If we cross that open ground, they'll cut us down. We have to flush them out. How? I walked over to the main control panel for the hydroelectric turbine. The system was currently dormant, bypassing the flow around the turbine. We control the power, I said. And we control the environment. I pointed to the fire suppression system controls on the wall. Halon gas for the server room. High-pressure sprinklers for the living areas. We can make that house uninhabitable, I said. We can turn their fortress into a trap. Elias, Sarah warned. If you trigger the sprinklers in this temperature, the pipes will burst. You'll destroy the lodge. You'll ruin the food. We'll starve. I looked at her. She was covered in mine grime, exhausted, holding a biohazard that people were killing for. It's not our food anymore, I said. And it's not our lodge. It's a battlefield. We either burn it down to save ourselves, or we hand them the key to the apocalypse. I put my hand on the main breaker. We need to know how many of them there are, I said. I'm going to pulse the lights. SOS pattern. If they're professionals, they'll react. They'll send someone to check the power source. And when they come here? Sarah asked, drawing her revolver. Then we introduce them to the home field advantage. I threw the breaker. Clunk. Outside, the floodlights on the summit house blazed to life, blindingly bright against the snow. Then I cut them. Pitch black. Then on. Then off. On. Off. On. Off. I left them on the third time. We watched through the frosted glass. The flashlight in the master suite window vanished. Then the front door of the summit house opened. 2 figures stepped out. White camo. Night vision goggles flipped down. Rifles raised. They were coming. Get behind the generator, I told Sarah. They're coming to check the fuse box. When they open that door, we take them. I racked the bolt on my rifle. I had 2 rounds left. We had escaped the mine, but we hadn't escaped the dark. We just brought it with us. The thing about a siege is that the waiting is worse than the dying. We were crouched in the dark, tucked behind the yellow bulk of the No. 2 diesel generator. The air in the shed was cold, smelling of oil and old concrete. Outside, the world was a blinding white wash of floodlights that I had triggered, but in here we were shadows. "They're drilling the lock," I whispered. The sound was a nasty, grinding shriek against the steel door. Sarah was huddled next to me, gripping her revolver with both hands. The barrel was shaking. Not much, but enough to miss at 10 yards. 2 rounds, I reminded myself, checking the chamber of the bolt-action rifle one last time. Don't miss. I didn't have a tactical vest or a helmet. I had a wool coat and a project manager's brain. I knew this room. I knew that the door opened inward. I knew that when it swung open, the person entering would be backlit by the courtyard floodlights, a perfect black silhouette against a wall of white. It's called the fatal funnel. The doorway is the most dangerous place on earth for the person walking through it. When it opens, I told Sarah, my mouth right against her ear, don't shoot immediately. Let him step in. Let him clear the frame. If you shoot too early, the second guy outside stays in cover. And if he throws a grenade? She asked, her voice trembling. He won't, I said, glancing at the backpack she was guarding. Not with the package in the room. They want the hard drive intact. Explosives are off the table. Zzzzzt clunk. The drill punched through the mechanism. The locking dogs disengaged with a heavy metallic groan. The door handle turned. "Ready," I breathed. I shouldered the rifle, steadying it against the generator housing. The door swung open. Light, brilliant, painful LED light, flooded the entryway. A figure stepped through instantly, weapon raised, moving with the fluid, aggressive grace of a professional. He didn't look. He scanned. His weapon-mounted light swept the room. Left, right. Beam hits the generator. Beam hits the far wall. He took a second step. Commit. A second figure appeared in the doorway behind him, covering the rear. Now. I squeezed the trigger. The recoil in the tight space was vicious. The muzzle flash blinded me for a microsecond. The lead figure didn't just fall. He was erased. The heavy caliber round caught him center mass, punching through his ceramic plate like it was cardboard. He was thrown backward, collapsing into a heap of white nylon and gear. "Contact front!" a voice screamed from outside. The second figure in the doorway didn't panic. He instantly dropped to a knee, firing blindly into the room. Pop, 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 pop. Bullets sparked off the generator casing above our heads, whining as they ricocheted around the concrete box. "Sarah, suppress!" I yelled, working the bolt on my rifle. Clack, clack. One round left. Sarah rose up and fired. Bang, bang. The revolver roared. She wasn't aiming. She was just putting lead in the air. It was enough. The second man flinched, scrambling backward out of the doorway, into the snow. "Door!" I screamed. "Close the door!" I sprinted from cover. It was stupid. It was suicide. But if that door stayed open, they would stand off at 50 yards and pick us apart. I reached the door, grabbing the dead man by his vest, and hauled him deeper inside. He was heavy, dead weight in the truest sense. I slammed the steel door shut and spun the locking wheel. It engaged. But the drill had damaged the latch. It wouldn't hold forever. "Are you hit?" Sarah yelled, her ears ringing. "No," I coughed, the smell of burnt gunpowder choking us. "Check the body. Get his weapon. Get his radio." I knelt over the fallen soldier. Up close, the gear was terrifying. This wasn't military surplus. This was cutting edge. Quad nods, 4-tube night vision, encrypted comms, and a rifle that looked like a spacecraft, a suppressed SIG MCX spear. I stripped the rifle from his sling. I checked the mag full. "Upgrade," I muttered. Sarah was going through his pockets. She pulled out a radio. It was squawking. "Man down! Man down! Team 2, secure the perimeter. They have heavy weapons. Repeat, target is armed with heavy caliber." I grabbed the radio from her. "They think we're a strike team," I said, a grim smile touching my lips. "They don't know it's just the caretaker and the nurse." I keyed the mic. "This is Elias," I said, my voice echoing in the small room. "I have your man. He's dead. I have his weapon. And I have the package." Silence on the frequency. Then a new voice. Calm. Baritone. Not out of breath. The voice of the man in charge. "Elias. That's a biblical name. A prophet, wasn't he?" "Who is this?" I asked. "Call me Viper. That seems to be the genre we're playing in tonight. Listen closely. Elias. You are in a concrete box. There is one door. I have 6 men outside. I have thermal overwatch. You have nowhere to go. I have the drive, I countered. And I have the vial. You blow this shed, you lose the asset. Correct, Viper said. Which is why we haven't fired an RPG into your lap. But we have other options. We have gas. We have time. And frankly, it's cold out here, and I'd like to wrap this up. Come and get it, I bluffed. No, he said. Here is the deal. You open the door. You place the pelican case on the snow. You walk out with your hands on your head. We take the case. We leave. You survive. I looked at Sarah. She was staring at the dead man's face. She had pulled his balaclava up. Elias, she whispered. Look. I looked. The man was young. Maybe 25. But it wasn't his age that mattered. It was the tattoo on his neck, just below the ear. A barcode. And under it, the same symbol that was on the ID card in the case. The tree with the lightning bolt. They aren't mercenaries, Sarah said. They're corporate security. They work for the same people who built this place. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They're the cleaners, I said into the radio. You work for the company. You're scrubbing the site. Viper chuckled. It was a dry, ugly sound. The company is dissolving, Elias. We're just collecting the severance package. Now, the deal. 10 seconds. He's lying, I told Sarah. Cleaners don't leave witnesses. If we walk out there, they execute us. So what do we do? She asked. We can't stay here. If they use gas. I looked around the room. The generators. The fuel lines. The main electrical bus. We need a distraction, I said. A big one. I looked at the captured rifle. It had an underslung grenade launcher, a 40mm tube. I checked the dead man's belt. He had 3 rounds for it. High explosive. Sarah, I said, do you remember the propane tank for the main lodge? The big 2,000-gallon buried tank. Yes. It's on the north side of the courtyard. The fill valve is above ground, I said. It's a white cap, about 50 yards away, near the gazebo. You can't hit that from here, she said. Not through the peephole. No, I said. But I can hit the snowbank next to it. And if I can rupture that valve. Propane is heavier than air, she finished. It'll pool in the courtyard. And the floodlights, I said, pointing to the breaker panel, are hot. If a spark hits that cloud, it'll level the summit house, she said. It'll kill them. It'll give us a smoke screen, I corrected. We run during the chaos. I keyed the radio again. Viper, I said. I'm sending the girl out with the case. Don't shoot. Smart man, Viper replied. Send her. I signaled Sarah to get behind the generator. Cover your ears, I said. Open your mouth to equalize the pressure. This is going to get loud. I walked to the door. I took a deep breath. I spun the wheel. I kicked the door open. I didn't step out. I dropped prone on the floor, the barrel of the captured rifle protruding just inches past the threshold. Through the scope, the courtyard was blindingly bright. I saw figures standing behind the stone pillars of the lodge. They were waiting. I aimed at the white mushroom cap of the propane tank fill valve in the distance. Thump. The grenade launcher kicked. The round sailed across the courtyard. It missed the valve by inches, slamming into the concrete retaining wall next to it. Boom! Snow and concrete shrapnel exploded. The valve was sheared off. A jet of white vapor, liquid propane converting to gas, erupted into the night air like a geyser. It hissed, a deafening snake sound, filling the lower depression of the courtyard instantly. What was that? Viper's voice crackled on the radio. Hold fire. Gas leak. Check your masks. They were confused. They thought I used tear gas. Wait for it, I whispered, aiming the rifle at the floodlight housing mounted on the corner of the lodge, directly above the expanding white cloud. The gas was spreading fast, rolling over the snow, enveloping the enemy positions. I squeezed the trigger on the rifle. Crack. The floodlight shattered. Sparks rained down. It was like watching the sun be born at ground level. The ignition wasn't a bang. It was a whoosh. A massive, expanding sphere of orange and blue fire consumed the courtyard. The shock wave hit the shed like a hammer, knocking the wind out of me. Go! I screamed, scrambling up. The world outside was an inferno. The heat was intense, instantly melting the snow. We sprinted out the door. We didn't run toward the lodge. We ran away from it, toward the tree line on the east flank, using the wall of fire as a shield. Behind us, men were screaming. The concussion had knocked them down, and the heat was driving them back. They weren't shooting at us. They were running for their lives. We hit the deep snow of the forest edge, lunging into the darkness. Don't stop, I yelled. We have maybe 2 minutes before they regroup. We scrambled up the ridge, lungs burning, the orange glow of the burning courtyard casting long, dancing shadows ahead of us. We had just blown up the most expensive property in the state. We had just declared war on a paramilitary unit, and we were still holding the Pelican case. We ran until my legs gave out. We collapsed in a thicket of spruce trees, a mile from the compound. I looked back. The summit house wasn't burning, but the courtyard was a blackened crater. The fire had died down, leaving only smoke. Did we get them? Sarah wheezed, clutching her chest. We slowed them down, I said. But Viper, guys like that don't die easy. I checked the captured radio. It was silent. Then, a click. Elias, Viper's voice came through. It was different now. No longer calm. It was ragged, angry, and cold as the grave. You burned my men. You burned my ticket out of here. I didn't answer. I just listened. The game has changed, he said. I'm not hunting you for the case anymore. I'm going to hunt you for sport. Run, caretaker. Run fast. I turned the radio off. Where now? Sarah asked. We can't go back to the cabin. We can't go to the lodge. We're in the open. I looked at the map in my head. The helipad, I said. There's a maintenance garage for the snowcats at the upper landing zone. It has a radio. A real one. Aviation band. Maybe we can reach someone who isn't trying to kill us. It's 3 miles, she said. Uphill. I handed her the captured rifle. I kept the bolt action. Then we better start walking, I said. We turned north, into the dark, leaving the fire behind us. But as we walked, I felt a vibration in the backpack again. The Pelican case. It was buzzing louder, and through the fabric of the pack, I could see a faint, rhythmic blue light pulsing. Sarah, I said. The case. She looked. The battery. Is it failing? No, I said, watching the pulse. It's not failing. It's transmitting. The crash beacon on the helicopter stopped because they turned it off. But this. The case itself was a beacon. They don't need to track our footprints, I realized, the horror setting in. We're carrying a GPS tracker. Turn it off. We can't. It's integrated into the cooling system. If we smash it, the sample warms up. We were running through the woods holding a flare. And Viper was coming. We were running with a lighthouse on our backs. The pelican case inside Sarah's pack wasn't just pulsing, it was strobing. A harsh, electric blue light was bleeding through the fabric of the backpack, casting a rhythmic shadow against the trees ahead of us. In the absolute darkness of the forest, we looked like a walking neon sign. "It's getting brighter," Sarah gasped, stumbling over a buried root. She caught herself on a pine bough, snow cascading down her neck. "Elias, they don't even need night vision. They can see this from space." I grabbed her arm, hauling her upright. "Keep moving. If we stop, we freeze. If we freeze, they catch us." Behind us, the sound of the snowmobiles had changed. It wasn't the erratic revving of a search pattern anymore. It was a steady, high RPM scream. They were on a vector. They were closing the distance mathematically. "They're cutting the switchbacks," I said, listening to the engines. "They aren't following our tracks. They're driving straight to the GPS ping." We were a mile from the compound, climbing the shoulder of the ridge toward the upper helipad. The terrain here was brutal, steep, choked with deadfall and massive boulders. It was impossible terrain for a snowmobile. Usually. But these guys were pros, and they had mountain sleds with long tracks and deep lugs. They could climb a wall if they hit it fast enough. "We can't outrun a machine," Sarah said, her voice tight with the specific panic of the hunted. "We have to ditch the case." "No," I said, though every survival instinct I had was screaming to drop it. "That case is the only reason Viper hasn't just riddled these woods with suppressive fire. He wants the drive intact. If we drop it, we become expendable. As long as we hold it, we're leverage. Leverage doesn't stop a bullet." "Sarah, listen to me." I pulled her behind the cover of a massive granite slab. "We need to kill the signal. Or mask it." "How?" "It's integrated." I looked at the case. The blue light was throbbing faster now. Flash, flash, flash. "Metal," I said. "We need a Faraday cage. Something to block the RF signal. We're in a forest, Elias. There's nothing here but wood and ice." I looked around. She was right. But my mind was racing, flipping through the mental blueprints of the mountain I had built over the last 6 months. I knew the infrastructure. I knew what lay beneath the snow. "The culverts," I said. "The drainage for the service road. That's back down the hill." "No," I said, pointing diagonally up the slope. "There's an old washout about 200 yards east. The logging road from the 1950s. They put in heavy corrugated steel pipes to channel the creek. Thick gauge steel. Buried under 5 feet of earth. A sewer. A shield," I corrected. "If we get inside, the earth and the steel might dampen the signal. It might make the GPS ghost out. If the signal vanishes, they have to stop and search visually." 200 yards, she measured. The engines were getting louder. "We have maybe 60 seconds before they're on top of us. Run." We broke cover. We scrambled sideways across the slope, fighting gravity. The blue light from the pack bounced off the snow, illuminating the trees like a strobe light in a horror movie. Quade AAA. The first snowmobile crested the ridge behind us. I saw the headlight beam cut through the timber, sweeping wildly as the machine bucked over a log. The driver was standing on the running boards, wrestling the sled through the tight trees. "Contact rear," I yelled. Sarah didn't look back. She drove her legs into the snow, lungs heaving. We hit the old logging road. It was barely a ledge now, overgrown with alders. But I saw it, the dark, circular maw of the corrugated pipe jutting out of the hillside. It was 3 feet in diameter. Inside. I shoved Sarah toward the hole. Go deep. Get to the middle. She dropped to her knees and crawled into the rusted pipe. I scrambled in behind her, dragging snow over the opening to hide our entry. We crawled 20 feet in. The pipe was freezing, the bottom lined with ice and dead leaves. But it was solid steel above us, buried under tons of dirt. "Stop," I whispered. We froze. In the darkness of the pipe, the blue light from the case was blinding. It reflected off the galvanized metal ribs, turning our hiding spot into a disco ball. "It's still blinking," Sarah whispered. "Wait." Outside, the roar of the engines grew deafening. The ground vibrated. I could feel the tremor in my knees. Then the sound changed. The engines dropped to an idle. Put, 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 put. They had stopped. "Lost signal," I breathed. It worked. The steel scrambled the uplink. We lay there, huddled together, listening. A voice, muffled but close. "Target signal lost. Last known position was Sector 4. "Eyes on," another voice commanded. "Dismount." They went to ground. "Check the thermal signatures." My heart stopped. Thermal. The pipe hid the GPS signal, and the earth masked our body heat from above. But the open ends of the pipe? We were 2 warm bodies in a metal tube. If they looked down the bore of this pipe with a thermal scope, we would light up like a candle. "We have to block the ends," I whispered to Sarah. "Pack snow. Now." We frantically scraped the ice and debris from the floor of the pipe, packing it into a wall in front of us. It wasn't much. A flimsy barrier of slush. Outside, the crunch of boots on snow. Slow. Deliberate. They were walking right over us. I heard the thump-thump of someone walking on the dirt above the pipe. Dust trickled down from the rivets onto my face. "Nothing here," a voice said, directly above my head. "Tracks are messy." They scrambled in the brush. "Keep moving," Viper's voice cut through the radio, faint but audible. If the signal dropped, they're either underground or they destroyed the unit. "Fan out. Grid search. If you see movement, you are weapons free." The boots moved away. The engines revved up again, moving east, away from the pipe. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "They're moving east," I whispered. "They think we kept running." "How long do we stay here?" Sarah asked. Her teeth were chattering. The cold of the steel was leaching the heat straight out of our bodies. "Not long," I said. "If we stay, we freeze. And eventually, that signal will punch through again." I looked at the case. The blue light was still pulsing. But now, there was something else. A sound. Click, click, click. It sounded like a Geiger counter. "Elias," Sarah said, staring at the case. "The hard drive indicator. It's flashing red. Red. Data corruption," she guessed. Or it's an upload," I realized. When the signal cut, maybe it switched modes. It's trying to dump data to a local source. We don't have a local source. "No," I said. "But the snowmobiles do. They have tactical networks. If this thing connects to their comms, it acts like a virus, or a beacon that jumps frequencies." We had to move. The pipe was a temporary coffin. "We need one of those sleds," I said. It was a crazy thought, born of exhaustion and the simple math of survival. We can't walk to the helipad. Not with them sweeping the grid. We need speed. Steal a snowmobile? Sarah looked at me like I'd suggested we fly. How? They're armed to the teeth. They split up, I said. I heard Viper say, fan out. That means they're riding solo or in pairs. If we can isolate one. Ambush, she said. She touched the captured rifle. We go back out, I said. We backtrack. They expect us to be ahead of them. They never look behind. We crawled out of the pipe. The air felt colder now, if that was possible. The wind had died, leaving a stillness that amplified every sound. We moved back toward where the snowmobiles had stopped. The tracks were churned deep into the snow, a highway of violence. We followed the tracks of the straggler. One machine had peeled off to the south, checking the lower ridge. There, I pointed. Through the trees, I saw the tail light. Red. Stationary. The driver had stopped. He was off the sled, standing by a tree, pissing. It was such a human moment, a mundane vulnerability in the middle of a hunt. He had his rifle slung across his chest. His helmet was on. The sled was idling, the headlight casting long shadows. I take him, I whispered to Sarah. You cover me with the SIG. Do not fire unless he spots me. If you fire, every other rider will be here in 60 seconds. Elias, you have a bolt action. If you miss. I won't shoot, I said. I'm going to use the night. I handed her the heavy .300 PRC. I took the combat knife from my belt. It was a tool I used for cutting insulation, not throats. The handle felt foreign in my grip. I moved. I kept the trees between me and his line of sight. I moved when the engine sputtered, masking my footsteps. He zipped up his pants. He turned back to the sled. He reached for a water bottle strapped to the handlebars. He was 10 feet away. I stepped out from behind the spruce tree. He sensed me. He spun around, reaching for his rifle. I didn't lunge. I tackled. I hit him waist-high, driving my shoulder into his midsection. We slammed into the snow. The air left his lungs in a wet whoosh. He was strong. He kicked, his heavy boot catching me in the shin. He clawed for his sidearm. I grabbed his helmet, wrenching his head back. He shouted, muffled by the plastic, and flailed. I jammed my forearm against his throat, pinning him to the frozen ground. Don't! I hissed, bringing the knife point to the soft gap between his helmet and his vest. Don't do it! He froze. His eyes, visible through the clear visor, were wide with shock. Sarah! I yelled. She ran out from the trees, the rifle leveled at his face. Roll over, I commanded. Hands on your head. I pulled his sidearm, a Glock 17, and tossed it into the deep snow. I ripped the radio cord from his vest. Zip ties. I asked Sarah. In the med kit. She tossed me 2 heavy plastic cuffs. I hog-tied him, hands to ankles behind his back. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't polite. You're dead, the man wheezed, spitting snow. Viper will skin you. Maybe, I said, standing up and panting. But not tonight. I looked at the snowmobile. It was a Ski-Doo Summit. 850 cubic centimeters engine. A mountain climbing beast. Get on, I told Sarah. What about him? She looked at the bound man. He'll freeze. He has a thermal suit, I said. And his buddies will find him when he misses his check-in. We aren't executioners. I straddled the seat. It felt warm. The engine vibration hummed through my legs. "Hold on tight," I said. "This is going to get loud." I hit the throttle. The track engaged with a violent jerk, throwing snow 40 feet behind us. The skis lifted off the ground. We weren't sneaking anymore. We were running. I aimed the sled straight up the slope, weaving through the trees, gunning for the upper helipad. The engine screamed, a distinct, high-pitched wail that echoed across the entire valley. Behind us, in the distance, I saw headlights turning. 1, then 2, then 4. The pack was turning. The chase was on. "Faster!" Sarah yelled in my ear, clutching my waist. I pinned the throttle to the bar. We hit a drift and launched, airborne for a terrifying second, before slamming down and carving hard to the left. We had speed. We had a machine. But we were heading for a dead end. The helipad was at the top of a cliff. If the radio there didn't work, there was nowhere left to run. And inside Sarah's pack, pressed against my back, the pelican case let out a new sound, a steady, piercing tone. "Elias!" Sarah screamed over the wind. "The case! It's getting hot. Physically hot. Hold it away from your body." We raced into the night, riding a barm up a mountain, with an army on our heels. If you have never ridden a snowmobile at 80 miles an hour in the dark, through a forest, while being shot at, don't. The world narrowed down to the cone of our single, jittering headlight. Trees blurred into walls of black and grey. The suspension bottomed out as we hit drifts, slamming my spine, but I didn't let off the throttle. I couldn't. Behind us, 3 other headlights were dancing in the rearview mirrors. They were in a phalanx, closing the gap. They were better riders than me. They were cutting the corners, leaning into the turns, gaining ground with every switchback. Crack! A bullet shattered the side mirror on the left handlebar. Plastic shrapnel stung my cheek. "Keep your head down," I screamed back at Sarah. She was buried in my back, her arms locked around my waist so tight I could barely breathe. The pelican case in her pack was vibrating against my spine like a frantic animal. The heat coming off it was searing. It felt like she was carrying a radiator. "Elias!" "The cliff!" she yelled. I saw it. The tree line ended abruptly. Ahead was the steppe, a steep, rocky incline that led up to the helipad plateau. It was a 40-degree slope of wind-packed ice. "Hold on!" I pinned the throttle. The sled hit the incline. The track spun, biting into the ice, throwing shards behind us. The front skis lifted toward the stars. We were climbing a wall. A red tracer round zipped past my ear, sizzling into the snow ahead of us. "They have night vision!" Sarah screamed. "They're shooting the track!" We crested the lip of the plateau, the sled going airborne for a terrifying second. We landed hard, the suspension groaning, skis slapping the frozen tarmac of the helipad. We were in the open now. The helipad was a flat, wind-swept circle of concrete on the very top of the mountain. In the center stood the windsock, stiff as a board in the gale. To the right was the maintenance garage, a low, corrugated steel building where the Piss-and-Bully snowcat was stored. It was our only cover. I drifted the sled sideways, spraying snow, and skidded to a halt in front of the garage's personnel door. "Off! Go! Go!" We scrambled off the machine. I kicked the door. Locked. "Shoot it!" I yelled. Sarah didn't hesitate. She raised the captured SIG rifle and fired 2 rounds into the lock mechanism. Bang, bang. I shouldered the door open. We tumbled inside, into the pitch black. I slammed the door and threw the deadbolt, jamming a steel chair under the handle for good measure. Safe! Sarah gasped, collapsing on the concrete floor. For a minute, I wheezed. I clicked on my headlamp. The garage was cavernous, dominated by the massive red bulk of the Pissenbully groomer. The air smelled of diesel and hydraulic fluid. But the loudest sound in the room wasn't our breathing. It was the pelican case. The tone was continuous now. Piercing. "Get it off," Sarah said, tearing at the straps of the pack. "It's burning me." She shrugged the pack off and kicked it away. It slid across the floor, stopping near the tracks of the snowcat. Smoke was curling from the zipper. "It's in thermal runaway," I said, rushing over to it. I unzipped the pack. The case was too hot to touch with bare hands. I used my gloves to pop the latches. I opened the lid. The interior was flashing red. A digital display on the internal battery unit was counting down. 3 o'clock. 2:59. Self-destruct. Sarah asked, her face pale in the red strobe light. Sterilization, I corrected, reading the warning label next to the timer. Biohazard containment failure. Thermal sterilization initiated. "It thinks it's being tampered with," she said. "Or the battery is critical." "If that timer hits 0, I said, looking at the glass vial clamped in the center, "it triggers a heating element. It boils the sample, destroys the data core. Can we stop it?" "We have to cool it," I said. "It's a fail-safe. If we get the core temperature down, the timer should pause." I looked around the garage. Snow. "We need snow." "No time," Sarah said. She pointed to a metal cabinet on the wall. "Fire extinguisher. CO2. "Yes." I grabbed the heavy red canister. I pulled the pin. "Stand back." I aimed the nozzle at the open case, specifically at the battery housing and the sensor array. Whoosh! A cloud of white, freezing carbon dioxide blasted the case. The temperature in the immediate area dropped by 40 degrees in seconds. The smoke stopped curling. The case frosted over instantly. I stopped spraying. We watched the timer. 1:45. 1:45. It stopped. The red flashing slowed to a steady amber pulse. Paused. I exhaled. "For now. We can't carry it any more," Sarah said. "It's unstable." "We don't need to carry it," I said. "We just need to survive it." I ran to the back of the garage, to the small office that overlooked the valley. The aviation radio. It was an old ICOM unit, mounted on the desk. Dust covered the knobs. "Please work," I whispered. I flipped the power switch. The amber backlight flickered, and stayed on. "We have power," I said. "This circuit is on the emergency solar backup." I grabbed the microphone. I tuned the frequency to 121.5, International Air Distress. "Mayday, mayday, mayday." I spoke clearly, my voice shaking only a little. "This is Silver Pine Station. We are under attack. We have a biohazard level 4 containment situation. Requesting immediate assistance. Static." I repeated it. "Mayday, mayday. Silver Pine. Hostiles on site. We have the Thorn package." Repeat. "We have the Thorn package." I released the button. Static. Then a crackle. A voice. Faint, breaking up, but human. "Station. Repeat. Coordinates." "Yes." Sarah grabbed my shoulder. "Someone's there." Coordinates are north 48 degrees, 30 minutes. I rattled off our position. We are in the upper maintenance garage. Surrounded. We need extraction. The voice came back, stronger this time. It wasn't Viper. It wasn't the cleaners. It sounded like a pilot. Copy, Silver Pine. This is National Guard Dustoff 29. We are operating in the sector. We picked up an ELT signal earlier. What is your status? National Guard. I looked at Sarah. Relief washed over me so hard my knees almost buckled. We have civilians under fire. Heavily armed hostiles. We have a priority biological asset. Asset? The pilot asked, his tone shifting. Did you say Thorn package? Affirmative. There was a pause. A long one. Dustoff 29 copying. Listen closely. Maintain your position. Do not surrender that package. We are 10 mics out. Keep your heads down. 10 minutes, I told Sarah. We just have to hold out for 10 minutes. Then, the garage door shuddered. Boom. Something heavy slammed into the main roller door. The metal buckled inward. They're here, Sarah whispered, raising the rifle. I looked at the personnel door. The chair was wedged tight. I looked at the big roller door. It was thin aluminum. It wouldn't stop a bullet. The snowcat, I said. Get inside the cab. It's armored glass. It's a roll cage. We scrambled up the tracks of the massive machine. We climbed into the cockpit of the piston bully. It felt like climbing into a tank. Viper knows we called, I said, locking the heavy doors. He likely heard the transmission on a scanner. He knows the clock is ticking. Outside, the PA system of a snowmobile crackled. Viper's voice, amplified and distorted, punched through the steel walls of the garage. Elias, I know you're in there. And I know you just called for a taxi. I didn't answer. I sat in the pilot's seat of the snowcat, looking at the controls. 10 minutes is a long time, Viper said. A lot can happen in 10 minutes. For instance, fire. I smelled it before I saw it. Smoke. Seeping under the roller door. They're torching the building, Sarah said. They're smoking us out. He can't burn the case, I said. He knows that. Send out the case, Viper yelled. And I let you walk. You have 30 seconds before I drive a plow through this wall and bury you. I looked at the dashboard of the snowcat. The key was in the ignition. Sarah, I said, fasten your seatbelt. What? This machine, I said, turning the key. The massive diesel engine roared to life, shaking the entire building. It has a 12-foot hydraulic plow blade, and 400 horsepower. You're going to ram the door? No, I said, dropping the transmission into gear. I'm going to introduce Viper to the only thing on this mountain meaner than him. I revved the engine. The garage filled with exhaust. 10 minutes to wait, I shouted over the roar. But I'm done waiting. I released the parking brake. The piston bully lurched forward. Hold on. I slammed the throttle forward. The 12-ton machine surged. We hit the roller door at 20 miles an hour. Crash. The aluminum tore like wet paper. We burst out of the garage into the swirling snow and darkness, the massive headlights of the snowcat blinding everything in front of us. Directly ahead, 3 men were standing behind their snowmobiles, rifles raised. They froze. They hadn't expected a tank. I dropped the plow blade. Move or die. I screamed inside the cab. The men dove. I crushed one of the snowmobiles under the right track. It crunched like a soda can. We were out. We were on the helipad. But we weren't running away. We were taking the center. I spun the machine around, positioning us directly under the windsock, placing the massive steel plow facing the enemy. We hold here, I yelled to Sarah. We make a stand. We were exposed. We were surrounded. But we were inside a 12-ton fortress, and the cavalry was 10 minutes out. Then a rocket flare hissed from the tree line. It struck the side of the snowcat. Thump. It didn't explode. It stuck. Burning magnesium. They're marking us. Sarah yelled. For what? Then I heard it. Not the chopping of a rescue helicopter, but the low, whining whistle of a mortar round dropping from the sky. Viper wasn't playing anymore. He was calling in fire. The mortar round didn't hit us. It hit the concrete apron of the helipad, 20 feet off our starboard flank. But when you are inside a metal box, close still feels like the end of the world. The concussion lifted the 12-ton piston bully onto one track. The cab rang like a struck church bell. My teeth slammed together so hard I tasted copper instantly. Move! Keep moving! Sarah screamed, though I could barely hear her over the ringing in my ears. I wrestled the steering yoke. The hydraulics groaned, fighting the shock wave. I slammed the machine back down onto both tracks and pirouetted hard to the left, spinning the massive plow blade to face the tree line. They're trying to mobility kill us, I yelled. They want to blow a track. Another whistle. Thump. A second round impacted behind us, near the burning garage. A plume of snow, concrete dust, and fire erupted into the night sky. Viper wasn't trying to capture the machine anymore. He was trying to crack it open like a walnut. Where is that chopper? I scanned the black sky desperately. Dust off. Where are you? Through the thick, armored glass of the windshield, I saw movement. Shadows detaching from the darkness of the tree line. Viper's men. They were advancing on foot, moving in a spread formation. They knew the mortar fire had pinned us. They were coming to finish the job with shaped charges or thermite. They're rushing the vehicle. Sarah yelled. She jammed the barrel of the captured SIG rifle into the small firing port on the side window, a little sliding hatch meant for passing paperwork, not bullets. Don't let them get to the tracks, I ordered. Sarah fired. Crack, crack, crack. The brass casings ejected inside the cab, bouncing off the dashboard, hot against my neck. One of the shadows crumpled. The others dove for cover behind the snowbanks. But they were close. Too close. Thwack. A high-velocity round smashed into the windshield directly in front of my face. The laminated glass spiderwebbed instantly, turning opaque white. I couldn't see forward. I'm blind. I shouted. I can't drive. I reached for the wiper controls, hoping to clear the debris, but the glass itself was shattered internally. Then the warning buzzer on the console screamed. Hydraulic pressure critical. They hit the lines, I said, watching the pressure gauge plummet. We're bleeding out. The snowcat lurched. The engine roared, but the tracks didn't move. The transmission slipped. The massive red machine shuddered and died, settling into the snow like a dying elephant. We're immobile, I said, the silence of the dead engine rushing back in to replace the roar. We're a bunker now. They're climbing up. Sarah hissed. I heard it. The heavy clomp of boots on the rear deck. They were on the roof. I grabbed the fire extinguisher, the same one we used on the case, and held it like a club. I pulled my revolver with my left hand. "Watch the roof hatch!" I yelled. The roof hatch handle spun. They were trying to breach. Sarah fired a round through the roof of the cab. Bang! A scream from above. A body rolled off the side, hitting the tarmac with a wet thud. But there were more. I saw a hand slap a magnetic charge against the side glass. A puck-sized disc with a blinking red light. Breaching charge. I grabbed Sarah and pulled her down into the footwell, covering her body with mine. Crack boom. The side window blew in. Not a shatter, but a violent implosion of glass dust and overpressure. Cold air and smoke rushed into the cab. A figure appeared in the broken window. Black balaclava. Night vision goggles glowing green. He raised a pistol. I fired my revolver from the floor. Boom. The figure jerked back, falling away from the window. But another was right behind him. "Give me the case." Viper's voice. He wasn't on the radio. He was right there, outside the shattered window, screaming over the wind. "Throw it out and you live." I looked at Sarah. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, clutching the pelican case to her chest. The case was humming again, the blue light strobing in the smoke-filled cab. We were out of moves. We were out of ammo. We were out of time. I raised the revolver toward the window. I had 2 rounds left. "Come get it!" I screamed, fully prepared to die in this frozen metal box. And then the sun came out. It wasn't the sun. It was a searchlight. A beam of light so intense, so white and pure, that it erased the shadows, the snowcat, and the men outside in a single stroke. And with the light came the sound. W-O-P, 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 W-O-P. The air pressure dropped. The snow around us was whipped into a frenzy, a wide-out hurricane. A voice boomed from the sky, amplified by a voice of God speaker system that shook my rib cage. "This is United States National Guard. Lay down your weapons. Lay down your weapons immediately." I looked up through the shattered windshield. Hovering 50 feet above us was a monster, a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter, matte black, doors open, and hanging out of the side doors were gunners. Behind, miniguns. Viper's men didn't surrender. They were professionals, which meant they knew when a fight was mathematically impossible. They scattered. They broke contact instantly, sprinting for the edge of the helipad, diving over the embankment toward the tree line. Viper hesitated. For 1 second, I saw him through the broken window. He looked at me. He looked at the case. His eyes were cold, calculating. He wasn't scared. He was just disappointed. Then he turned and vanished into the swirling snow. "Ground element," the helicopter speaker boomed. "Exit the vehicle. Hands visible. Move to the landing zone." I looked at Sarah. She was shaking, tears cutting tracks through the soot on her face. "We made it," she whispered. "Let's go," I said, "before they change their minds." I kicked the jammed door open. We tumbled out onto the tarmac. The wash from the rotor blades was brutal. It was like standing in a freezing tornado. I helped Sarah up. She had the backpack strapped tight. The Black Hawk flared, its wheels touching down on the concrete. The suspension compressed. 2 soldiers jumped out. They weren't standard infantry. They wore biological hazard suits, OPP gear, gas masks. They rushed us. "Identify!" One of them shouted over the rotor noise, grabbing my arm. "I'm Elias. This is Sarah." I yelled back. "We have the package." The soldier looked at the backpack. He saw the blue light pulsing through the fabric. He didn't touch it. He recoiled slightly. "Get them on board," he signaled to the crew chief. "Isolation protocols. Do not touch the containment unit." They hustled us toward the open door. I climbed in, pulling Sarah up behind me. The interior of the Black Hawk was stripped. No seats. Just cargo straps and a biocontainment pod bolted to the floor. "Strap in," the crew chief yelled, pointing to the floor anchors. I sat on the cold metal floor, buckling the heavy canvas belt. Sarah sat next to me, still hugging the pack. "Give me the headset." I gestured to the hanging ear protection. I put the headset on. The roar of the rotors dampened instantly to a dull hum. "Dust off 29 to command," the pilot's voice crackled in my ear. "Come. Board. Package secured. 2 friendlies on board. We are RTB. Braking station." The helicopter lurched. My stomach dropped. We lifted off. I looked out the open door. Below us, Silver Pine was a map of destruction. The summit house was dark. The courtyard was a black, smoking scar where the propane tank had blown. The snowcat sat broken and steaming on the helipad, and at the edge of the tree line I saw a single tiny heat signature on the thermal display of the gunner's monitor. A man standing still, watching us leave. Viper. He hadn't run. He was marking the vector. "Elias." A new voice came over the headset. It wasn't the pilot. It was coming from the rear of the helicopter, from one of the men in the biosuits. I looked at him. He was holding a tablet. "My name is Colonel Vance," the voice said. "You've had a hell of a night." "We did our job," I said into the boom mic. "We saved the asset." "You did," Vance said. "But I need you to understand something before we land. You didn't just save a hard drive, son." He pointed at the pelican case in Sarah's lap. "That isn't a cure. And it isn't a weapon. Not in the way you think." "What is it?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling over the intercom. Vance looked at her through the lenses of his gas mask. "It's the patient zero sample," he said. "But not from where you think. That sample didn't come from a lab. It came from something we found in the ice 3 months ago. Something old." I stared at the case. The blue light pulsed. Bodump, bodump, like a heartbeat. "And the reason the world went dark," Vance continued, "is because we tried to wake it up. And it screamed." I looked out the window at the endless, frozen mountains passing below us. We weren't being rescued. We were just being moved to a higher security cage. And we had brought the end of the world right along with us.